tonight, something extraordinary and dangerous has just unfolded. We are watching a tectonic shift in the war machine that Moscow is running, a profound recalibration of strategy that moves the battlefield away from the frozen trenches of eastern Ukraine and straight into the nerve centers, the parliaments, and the very electrical grids of Western Europe. This isn't a transition. This is an admission of failure on the front line, immediately weaponized into a new, terrifyingly effective form of warfare. It is a moment when the hidden architecture of international conflict, the silent, high-level intelligence assessments, has come crashing into the open, and the alarm is being sounded not by anonymous analysts, but by the highest echelons of Western intelligence itself. The warning is blunt, it is unflinching, and it comes straight from Vauxhall Cross, the headquarters of MI6. Sir Richard Moore, the director of the UK's Secret Intelligence Service, has just delivered an assessment to NATO permanent representatives that rips the mask off the Kremlin's current geopolitical posture. Moscow is no longer committed to a kinetic conquest strategy. That path, Moore warns, has failed. The immense strategic investment required to seize and hold territory is yielding diminishing returns. The Russian military machine, while vast and cruel, has been effectively stalemated by Ukrainian resolve and Western aid. So they shifted. They pivoted hard. Moore's assessment reveals that Putin's new objective is a strategy he chillingly refers to as controlled stagnation. Think about that phrase for a moment. Controlled stagnation. It is not about winning the war in Ukraine anymore. It is about manufacturing a specific, targeted, political collapse across the capitals of the European Union. It is about dragging the conflict into a paralyzing state of equilibrium on the military map, a state that demands continuous commitment of resources, continuous political capital, continuous internal strife within the Allied bloc, all leading to what MI6 defines as catastrophic political fatigue within EU capital cities by the second quarter of 2026. This isn't just intelligence jargon. This is a projected timeline for the collapse of Western unity. The director of MI6, in a restricted, high-classification briefing, reportedly crystallized this new reality in one sentence that should be echoing in every single war room and parliament today. Moscow now believes that attrition in Brussels is a faster route to victory than territorial gains in Kharkiv. This strategic reprioritization, this move to the hybrid dark arts, is what defines this moment. It is the realization that the true vulnerability of the West is not its tanks or its missile defense systems, but the patience and cohesion of its democratic process. If Moscow can make the cost of supporting Kiev so politically toxic, so internally destabilizing, and so economically punishing that governments fall and political mandates shatter, then the war is won without firing a single missile across the NATO border. That is the genius and the terror of controlled stagnation. It weaponizes the clock against the West, banking on the inevitable decay that comes from prolonged, unresolved crises. This is the context. This is the new doctrine. Now let's look at the immediate, terrifying evidence that this strategic shift is already operational and deeply successful. We are talking about actions that are immediate, measurable, and are already plunging major European economies into crisis. The first, starkest evidence of this new hybrid doctrine comes from the very bedrock of modern civilization, the electrical grid. German officials have just confirmed a cyber attack of an unprecedented scale, scope, and technical complexity. Germany's Federal Office for Information Security, the BSI, has confirmed the successful, intentional compromise of operational technology systems, OT systems, in 14 regional electrical transformer stations across two crucial, heavily populated German states, Saxony and Bavaria. This wasn't standard digital espionage. This was sabotage. This was the digital equivalent of planting bombs inside the central infrastructure of a sovereign NATO nation. The sheer audacity of this action cannot be overstated. Operational technology, the systems that manage the physical world, the systems that open and close breakers, that regulate flow, that ensure the grid doesn't collapse under strain. These are the hardest systems to penetrate. They are usually air-gapped, isolated, secured by multiple layers of legacy hardware. Yet Moscow found the seam. BSI attributes the customized zero-day exploit, an exploit designed explicitly for this network configuration, directly to Russia's notorious GRU Unit 26165. The world knows them by their ominous nickname, Fancy Bear. Fancy Bear didn't just gain access. They maintained persistence and deployed their malicious code during the coldest week of the year. This isn't just about showing capability. This is about maximizing human suffering and economic damage. The objective was clear: targeting grid stability during peak energy demand, ensuring maximum disruptive effect, and generating maximum political panic within the German populace. Imagine the implications of 14 separate transformer stations failing simultaneously in critical industrial and residential heartlands. This attack was not designed to shut down the entire country, which might prompt an immediate, overwhelming military or cyber response. It was designed precisely in line with the MI6 strategy of controlled stagnation, to generate localized, devastating, continuous disruption, to force regional governments to deploy resources, to shatter public confidence in infrastructure resilience, and to inject a continuous, low-level anxiety that permeates every layer of German society. This is attrition by outage. This is the cold, calculated cruelty of hybrid warfare realized on the ground, or rather in the servers that run the ground. The attack on Saxony and Bavaria serves as an operational template. It proves that the Kremlin has successfully moved from targeting simple data theft to targeting physical critical infrastructure that sustains millions of lives. This is the moment when the digital front line became fused with the physical front line in Central Europe. And if Germany, the economic engine of the European Union, can be hit with such precision, such impunity, and such devastating effect, then every other NATO capital must now look inward at their own vulnerable, aging grids and ask, are we next? And the answer, based on the intelligence, is a resounding yes. Now let's circle back to the conventional front. The front line that Moscow wants the West to remain fixated upon, the kinetic battle space that is consuming endless resources. The operational data coming out of Ukraine confirms the core premise of the MI6 warning. The military front is functionally, deliberately stalemated. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that despite relentless, localized assaults, despite throwing immense resources, both material and human, into the meat grinder of the Donbass, Russian ground forces have failed to advance more than 750 meters west of the critical Avdiivka axis in the past 72 days. 750 meters. That is less than half a mile in over 2 months of continuous, desperate fighting. This microscopic number is not a minor footnote in the war report. It is the strategic smoking gun. It confirms, emphatically, the MI6 assessment that the front line is functionally stalemated. Moscow is consuming resources at an unsustainable rate for a return of no strategic value. Why maintain this level of costly, unsuccessful engagement? Because the purpose of the conventional front is no longer territorial gain. Its purpose is consumption. It is designed to consume Western attention, consume ammunition stockpiles, consume political will in Washington and Brussels, and consume the perception that a decisive Ukrainian victory is achievable soon. The front line is now a massive, bloody theatrical performance designed to generate the impression of a never-ending war. A war that can only be solved through negotiation on Moscow's terms, after Europe has exhausted its political spirit. The controlled stagnation relies on a distracting, bleeding border. The 750-meter stalemate is evidence that this distraction strategy is successful, militarily speaking, even as it costs thousands of lives. The war has simply moved. It has migrated from the visibility of satellite maps and drone footage to the silent, dark realm of subsea cables and deep-cover digital espionage. And the next set of facts shows the terrifying, calculated reach of Moscow into the strategic, watery heart of Europe. We now turn our attention north, to the critical, contested waters of the Baltic Sea, the strategic bathtub that acts as a vital artery connecting NATO's newest members to its core. Swedish Defense Intelligence, MUST, has confirmed that the simultaneous severance of 2 absolutely critical subsea communication cables was caused by non-conventional maritime mining devices. This is a profound escalation. These weren't fishing trawlers dragging anchors. These were targeted attacks using specialized equipment designed to execute strategic sabotage. Where did this happen? One severance point was near the island of Gotland, Sweden, a strategically vital, highly sensitive military location that has recently been the focus of intense NATO maneuvering. The second cut occurred in the Gulf of Finland, a narrow choke point essential for maritime traffic and data flow between the Baltic states and the West. The consequence of these 2 simultaneous, targeted cuts was catastrophic. and silent. The disruption caused widespread degradation of military C-4ISR capabilities in the Baltic region for over 18 hours. C-4ISR, command, control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. This is the circulatory system of modern military operations. When you cut the cables, you don't just slow down the internet. You blind intelligence operations. You disrupt the ability of naval commanders to communicate securely. You create an 18-hour black hole of situational awareness precisely in a region that is perpetually on edge against potential Russian intrusion. This is the very essence of the hybrid strategy, creating windows of profound vulnerability without firing a single shot that can be officially attributed as an act of war demanding a NATO Article 5 response. These devices, the non-conventional maritime mines, leave no signature. They deploy silently, they execute their mission, and they dissolve, leaving only the profound geopolitical consequence in their wake. The message is unmistakable. Even the deepest, seemingly most protected arteries of European communication are within reach of Moscow's shadow fleet. And this vulnerability is not just theoretical. An 18-hour degradation of C-4ISR capabilities in the Baltic allows for unseen movements, allows for undetected surveillance, and creates the profound risk that if a true kinetic crisis were to flare up, a skirmish in the air, a conflict at sea, NATO's coordinated response would be delayed, hampered, and potentially fragmented by the communication blackout. The psychological impact of realizing that crucial strategic communication relies on cables that can be silently, effortlessly severed is perhaps the most damaging outcome of all. It breeds the fear and the uncertainty that feeds the catastrophic political fatigue more warned about. The escalation of these attacks, from digital sabotage against German grids to maritime mining against Swedish cables, has triggered an inevitable, desperate domestic security response across the frontline states of Europe. We are watching democracies, in real time, turning inward and militarizing their own civilian infrastructure against a ghost enemy. Nowhere is this response clearer than in Poland, a nation that understands the Russian threat with an almost existential clarity. Following irrefutable evidence of escalating Russian drone surveillance, coupled with intensifying, coordinated social media destabilization campaigns aimed at sowing discord within Warsaw, the Polish Prime Minister enacted emergency legislation. The specific action mandated by this emergency decree is shocking in its scope. The deployment of 4,000 personnel from the Internal Security Agency, the ABW. These are domestic intelligence and security forces, now redirected not towards traditional counterterrorism or organized crime, but towards monitoring and securing Poland's critical national infrastructure. 4,000 intelligence agents tasked not with catching spies abroad, but with protecting power plants and gas storage facilities at home. This is what modern war looks like. The target list is highly sensitive, but one site stands out: the Strategic National Gas Storage Facility near Włocławek. This facility is crucial for Poland's energy independence and its ability to withstand the weaponization of energy supply by Moscow. If Włocławek is compromised, the economic and political fallout for Poland, and for Central Europe, is immense. By deploying the ABW to guard tanks of gas, Poland is acknowledging that the threat is not just external, but internal. It recognizes that the enemy's goal is to turn public anxiety into political chaos, leveraging infrastructure vulnerabilities to shatter government authority. The deployment of 4,000 ABW agents represents a monumental commitment of political and security capital. It shows that governments are now forced to treat critical infrastructure, pipelines, transformer stations, gas depots, as military targets that require constant, high-level intelligence protection. This siphoning of resources and attention away from the traditional functions of democracy and national security is exactly what the strategy of controlled stagnation is designed to achieve. It forces NATO members to spend their money, their focus, and their political will guarding against ghosts and shadows, instead of uniting against the primary, defined threat on the Ukrainian border. This is how the European political system is being systematically ground down, one security deployment at a time. The cumulative cost of constant vigilance will ultimately exceed the cost of the kinetic war, and that, according to Moscow, is the faster route to victory. All of these actions, the cyber attacks on Germany, the maritime sabotage in the Baltic, the forced security deployments in Poland, are not random acts of aggression. They are coordinated, purposeful campaigns that point toward a single, terrifying strategic objective. And that objective has a code name. Leaked intelligence from a joint French-German security assessment. A high-stakes, cross-border analysis following the recent wave of hybrid attacks has revealed the Kremlin's current primary strategic objective. It is codenamed Project 85. Project 85 is the culmination of the strategy of catastrophic political fatigue. It is the ultimate goal toward which Fancy Bear, the Shadow Fleet, and the entire disinformation apparatus are working. The objective of Project 85 is nothing less than the complete dissolution of the current government coalitions in at least 2 major NATO member states through coordinated, overwhelming disinformation and internal destabilization by March 2026. And the intelligence is painfully specific about the targets: Germany and the Netherlands. Why Germany and the Netherlands? Because they represent the 2 indispensable pillars of NATO's Western European core. Germany provides the industrial muscle, the financial stability, and the geographical depth required to sustain the coalition. The Netherlands, with its critical ports and its deep commitment to EU financial and military support for Ukraine, is a vital node in the logistical and political architecture. If Berlin and The Hague are plunged into political chaos, if their ruling coalitions collapse under the weight of fabricated crises and intense public pressure derived directly from the fear caused by things like grid failures and energy insecurity, the entire edifice of Western support for Ukraine shatters. This is the ultimate existential threat posed by hybrid warfare. It bypasses tanks and air superiority and aims directly at the fragile heart of democratic governance. Project 85 isn't about winning a war. It's about rigging the peace that follows. If Moscow can achieve regime change through chaos, if they can install governments weakened by internal strife, or worse, governments sympathetic to Russian interests, then the war in Ukraine is rendered irrelevant. All the gains, all the sacrifices, all the political unity forged in the heat of conflict dissolves. The deadline is March 2026. That is just over a year away. This timeline, revealed by the French-German assessment, aligns perfectly with the MI6 projection of catastrophic political fatigue by Q2 2026. All the major intelligence agencies are now pointing to the same pressure point, the same moment of potential failure, the same cliff edge Europe is rushing toward. We are no longer discussing whether a confrontation is possible. We are in the confrontation. We are inside a carefully calibrated, strategically brilliant, and profoundly destructive campaign of political attrition that aims to dismantle the core alliances that have sustained global stability for generations. This isn't posturing. This isn't routine diplomatic tit-for-tat. This is the closest we have come in months to a confrontation shaped not by missiles launched across a geographical border, but by the raw, brutal force of political will and the weaponization of civilian life. The next few months are not about military headlines. They are about political resilience. They are about whether democratic institutions can withstand a targeted, state-sponsored campaign of manufactured chaos. They are about whether Europe can absorb the shocks of severed cables and failing grids without turning that internal pain into the political fatigue Moscow is banking on. This is a moment when words begin to harden into posture, when posture leans dangerously toward escalation, and when escalation threatens to become something neither Washington, nor Berlin, nor Brussels can control once it dissolves into the chaos of Project 85. The battle is already raging, and the front line is your electrical outlet, your gas bill, and the stability of your government. The stakes could not possibly be higher.